when I got married, moved to Louisiana and have settled here, raising two children here. And this is where I went to grad school and got my master's in social work, infant mental health specialty, and worked as Quinn told you. So that's my social location. One of the reasons social location is so important is that we want to show that we can talk about things that sometimes people feel are invisible or um, not sure if they can bring up difficult topics with us. So one of the ways we can say we can talk about race, we can talk about gender is by opening that up. And that's the same way when we provide information on other difficult topics in our settings. I'm going to take a minute before doing our learning goals to turn off my camera. And I'm doing that because I want us to stick together and stay connected. And I'm a little worried about my internet connection. So I'll have a picture up. I'm here with you. I'm excited to be with you. And my camera is turning it off. We have four major learning goals today. And the first one is that trauma is what happens inside you as a result of what happens to you. That trauma impacts our interactions with people and the world all around us. The second is how you are matters, and reflective practices prepare you to be present. The third is that responsive, respectful relationships are good for everyone and are essential for reducing harm when caring for traumatized children and their families. And lastly, that our good intentions are not enough. How children and families experience our actions make the difference. So let's start with this real leader in our field, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, who shares with us that the single most important thing that we need today is the courage to look this problem, and that's ACEs, in the face and say, this is real. This is all of us. And we know that it takes courage to show up and face that children are experiencing all of the difficulties that families experience. We like to think of childhood as happy and free, but they they are living through things with the rest of us in community. And our work has the potential to interrupt the path between adverse experiences and early death and disease. And that's a theme we're going to keep coming back to, that we have the power to change the trajectory of the outcomes, even when we might not have the power to change what children are exposed to. So thank you for showing up and doing the work. It's hard. It can be exhausting and painful. It takes courage. Um, and let's pull motivation from knowing that your hard work is worth it. The evidence is clear that the presence of a responsive caregiver changes the trajectory of a child's life significantly for the better. And so our goal in this hour is that we will all leave with a renewed connection to the transformative power of your relationships. And I pulled this directly from the Whole Health Louisiana materials because it so beautifully shows the powerful forces that we are living within. And so this is a big problem. And this is why finding that courage is so important, because ACEs are the single biggest predictor of later problems in adult health and well-being. So here's that motivation. You might not be able to change all of these things, but you can shift the impact of these experiences in children's life through the power of your relationship. And we know that those impacts are big. So when you're thinking, what can my relationship do? What am I preventing? This is the powerful um, prevention your relationship has, that you can help children have better impacts in health, better outcomes in their behaviors, and better outcomes in their life potential just by showing up in using your trauma-informed practices. Oh, excuse me, going back. Sometimes you'll know that a child has experienced a traumatic event, and sometimes you will not know. Trauma can show up in a single overwhelming event, or as repeated exposures over a period of time. Dan Siegel gave us such a beautiful, simple explanation of trauma, and that is that trauma is an experience that overwhelms our capacity to cope. And that's where your relationship comes in, is building that capacity to cope. And Resmaa Menakem also gave us this powerful reminder that trauma is not just in the specific incidents that happen in a child's life, it is also the generational trauma that gets carried in our body. And that as communities live with trauma all around them, it gets powerfully experienced within individuals, within families, and within cultures, that our traumas are not evenly distributed throughout our culture. And so showing up with a trauma-informed practice for every single person we meet is important. Because trauma reactions serve a purpose. They help us survive. They help us stay safe, but they are not always helpful in the long run or when applied all the time. That Stephen Porges gives us this great quote, and that is that trauma compromises our ability to engage with others by replacing patterns of connection with patterns of protection. And that limits our choices. We start to avoid certain feelings, certain people, certain situations or places. And that constriction on our freedom really limits our life, loses our vitality, and takes us out of connection with ourselves and the other people around us. And connection is the natural state for people. So, what makes the difference? Not all children who experience a traumatic event will have lasting traumatic reactions. And what some of the things that make a difference are how severe the event is, or how close children were to the event, a prior history of trauma, or many, many other family and community factors. But one of the largest difference is the caregiver's reaction at the time of the trauma. That the caregiver's reaction has a tremendous impact on how the child processes and makes sense of the event, and about whether they have the capacity to cope, because children depend on the adults around them to regulate with them. And the coping resources of the caregivers are so very important. You are one of those caregivers. And so you have the opportunity to also scaffold the capacity of the parents. So it's like a twofold effect. You can directly be there to support children and support the capacity of parents to continue to support children. And so here we come back to our theme of you can show up to interrupt the path between ACEs and early disease and death and behavior and health outcomes. Let's remember our best practices, our key principles of trauma-informed care as defined by SAMHSA. And I love this plain language phrasing of the principles of trauma-informed care. Um, we chose universal precautions as the theme for how we apply these best practices because families may not choose to share their trauma exposure with us. But the problem is epidemic, and we can assume that many of the families we're serving are coping with past traumatic events or current traumatic events. And these practices are demonstrated to improve engagement and participation. Secondly, trauma-informed practices strengthen the capacity of children and families to cope with future events. That, so then they can have fewer lasting incomes from those events should they have to face them. And lastly, practice that is not responsive to the impact of trauma has the potential to make things worse by reactivating trauma responses. So we want all of our actions with children, with families, to answer these questions. I am safe. People share my experience. I can trust. I have choices. My culture is valued, and I have a voice, and I can be empowered to use it. So before we can show up day after day for others, we have to take care of ourselves. And so many times when we're talking about healing after trauma, we kind of end the presentations with, oh, by the way, don't forget self care. And we all know that metaphor of putting on our oxygen mask before helping another passenger. But today, the primary strategy we are offering is to connect with empathy with each child and each caregiver, to listen deeply, to offer a safe space to regulate emotions, to make sense of what's happening and experience belonging. And although it sounds simple, it takes a lot of effort to be present in this way. So we're starting with self-care because we not only do we carry the experience of the people we show up to help, we have our own histories of trauma and difficulty. And so when we choose to be present, we are choosing to carry the load with them. So before we can do that, we want to make a plan for taking care of ourselves. So that is step number one of trauma-informed practice. I love this poetic quote from Dr. Rachel Remen. The expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet. And so carrying that pain, that loss, can activate our own systems of protection instead of connection. And yet the tool we have to offer is the connection. So think deeply about your own plan for building that plan for self-care, making those habits, setting aside time um, to reflect and learn and pay attention to your experience, to purposely find ways to stay connected with others, to know your why, what motivates you to do this work. And I have thrown out my why, which is, wow, I have the potential to interrupt this pathway to early death and disease. Knowing that because we carry trauma in our body, Dr. Menachem said, we have to plan for rest and food. We have to plan for physical activity to shake out some of the ways trauma is held in our bodies. And we stay motivated by celebrating our progress and small victories. We can't wait to celebrate till we eliminate traumas from children's lives. We have to celebrate each small piece and know that moving the needle even a little bit makes a big difference. I want to tell a story from the We Play Center. Here are some beautiful pictures of the We Play Center where I have the privilege to work with a great, great team. And the story is of a woman who started showing up with her two children, um, came, played, was such a responsive caregiver. They had fun. The kids made friends. The mom connected with other people. She enjoyed the staff there. She asked questions and she just really showed up so curious, so engaged. She joined one of our programs called Bonding and Brain Building. And in that program, parents are given a bag of toys, given a booklet of activities for playing, for a 5-week program, things to do every day to just set aside time for child-led play and enjoying your children. And then after getting her bag of toys, she stopped showing up. We didn't see her. We have a very strengths-based approach, so we reached out to her a little. We trust that she was making the best decision for her time, and we trusted that she would continue to use those toys and activities in the way that was right for her family. A few months later, she let us know that she had moved, and she had moved because she was leaving a home life with violence in the home, some domestic violence there. And she confided to us that her time at the We Play Center was this bright spot in her week. That when she came with her children, they felt safe. They felt that sense of belonging. And as a result, she felt more connected to them than at any other part of her life. And as they were feeling safe and feeling connected, she could really use her whole brain and see her situation and realize this is the life I want to give to my children. And having that time connected with her whole self allowed her to do her problem solving, to make a plan, and to organize herself to leave a violent situation for a situation where she could care safely for her children. And I tell that story because we did not know what she was going through. At the moment when she was coming, she did not tell us that that was her situation. And yet, the trauma-informed practices that answered those questions, do I have choices? Do I have a voice? Am I safe? Do I have a sense of belonging? Can I trust? Having the answers to those questions empowered her to take powerful steps and really change the trajectory of her life and that of her children. We're going to show a video that kind of talks about how to share that whole brain experience. It is not showing up. Here we go. Just needed a minute. Just needed a minute. I see it circling, circling. It's loading. I'm taking deep breaths because I want it to work. Here we go. Can you hear it? No. I'm going to stop sharing and reshare to make sure that I chose all of the right elements so you can hear it because I love this video. I want you to see it. Share sound, optimize for video, reshare, and we're starting over.
Siegel. He's a psychiatrist down at
Is that better?
UCLA, and he talks about the brain in terms of the hand. So if you tuck in your thumb and fold over your fingers, the finger part becomes the prefrontal cortex, and he uses the acronym FACES. So when we are accessing this part of our brain, we are flexible, adaptable, coherent, energized, and stable. And if we are not in this part of the brain when we feel stressed or triggered or vulnerable, then we flip into our brainstem, which is our fight or flight response. And our thumb represents the amygdala, which is the radar of am I safe, am I not safe? And if the amygdala gets the sense that I'm not safe, then boom, we go into that fight or flight response. But if the amygdala does feel safe, then we can access that prefrontal cortex again and we can be more integrated. So that's the grown up version, but how we can teach our kids, and I start this with our little ones as early as 2, is to say that when our brain is here, then we're happy, we're cozy, we can be really creative, we can think of really good solutions. And the Mind Up curriculum, when they talk about the brain, they use the example of being a wise leader. So when we tell our kids, when we're here, we're able to have our wise leader be in charge. But when our security guard takes over and doesn't feel like the wise leader is safe, then they say, oh, wise leader, you got to go out, right? The security guard kind of takes over. And at that point, then we access that fight or flight response. So what I say to kids is when we're here, we are in the green zone, we're happy, we're safe, we're cozy, we can think of great ideas. When we get mad or sad or scared, then our security guard protects that wise leader, and boom, we are mad, we are in the red zone, we're crying, and I really just describe the behavior. And I might even use the example like, do you remember when your sister took all those raspberries yesterday and you were crying? You were here. So you can call this the security guard, you can call this part the wise leader, and that when we're here, we're in the red zone and we're super mad or we're super scared. And that's really all kids need to know is how we feel when we're here and how we feel when we're here. And then the question that I simply ask my students and my kids is I just say, where's your brain right now? And kids will be super honest. They'll be like, it's like here. And then I'll just say, okay, what do we need to do to get our brain back to here? And that's where the teaching comes in for the emotional regulation and what's going to help soothe them, what's going to help get their brain back to here. Because I say we can't solve problems, we can't come up with any good solutions until our brain is here. Real moments are learning moments.
Thank you all. And I love this video so much because being able Bringing our whole brain to interactions is important for us as the caregiver, for the parents, and for the children. And the idea that we can start teaching children so young, even toddlers, to better understand what's happening inside them is the essence of trauma informed practice, of giving that empowerment, giving that voice, helping them to understand, and being there with them. It's so important to show up as a whole brain adult because children, an upset adult is always a threat to a child's perceived safety. A child will never be calmer than the brain state of the adult. And it makes sense that when children or adults are experiencing trauma reactions, or that amygdala is saying, I'm not safe, that they're moving around using their safety brain. Safety is so important, and trauma trains the brain to be on the lookout for danger. Their past experience has taught the security guard to stay alert and to get ready to use those survival tools of fight, flight, freeze, lock, fawn. So, and whatever part of the brain is most active, that's the part that's getting stronger. So, every moment of safety and calm that we can offer to children lets them strengthen that whole brain. And they're still building that part of the brain. We know that it's not, that cortex is not fully built till mid 20s. So, they maybe only have a yarmulke or a visor amount of frontal cortex, right? When they're running around without a lid often. So we want to help them build that capacity to be in that whole brain. And we give them that by being there with them. And every moment that they experience in that whole brain experience state strengthens it for them. And then they bring that stronger brain into all their future interactions. So when we want to stay in our whole brain with the children that we're caring for, our mindset is so important. I'm giving you three pieces of mindset to carry with us to help us find that strength to bring these trauma informed interactions to families. And the first is gratitude. Thank you for showing me how you feel. I will help you find safe ways to express yourself. And the second mindset shift is your child isn't giving you a hard time. Your child is having a hard time. When our brains perceive that someone is giving us a hard time, our own safety centers are promoted and we're getting ready to fight for our rights in that moment. When we conceive of it as someone is having a hard time, then our helper instincts can kick in and say, how can I help this child in this moment? And the last brain shift that I'm proposing that we all hold on to is often attributed to a Swedish proverb, and that is love me when I deserve it least, when I least deserve it, because that is when I need it the most. We want our children to know that when they are having a hard time, I have your back. I'm here for you. Um, Instead, what children often experience is when they're behaving very badly, when they're out of control and overwhelmed, that they get disconnected from the people around them. They get sent to time out or sent to be by themselves. And we want that trauma brain to know you are safe and you are connected so they can compose themselves and bring their whole brain into problem solving. When we take these mindset shifts into practical situations, we're going to remember that sometimes children's safety brain is being triggered. So they are feeling hyper vigilant. They're on the lookout for danger, or they're not getting enough sleep, or they startle easily. Their heart is beating so fast, or they're having trouble focusing. And in those moments, they're never going to be able to sit still in circle time. It's going to be harder to understand when we're giving them directions. It's going to be harder to trust that other people are there to be helpers. With our mindset, we're going to assume they're doing the best they can and meet them where they are. So how do we do that? One of the ways when we know that when that trauma brain is activated, we can bring mindfulness and calming practices to our interactions with them in the moment when they're having a hard time, but also before they're having a hard time. We can playfully practice these ways of being together. So give their brain the repetitions of doing it so that when they are upset, they can more easily pull on those practices and do them with us and use them as a tool. And we start this with infants. At training grounds, we teach parents to massage infants. It is an early way of saying, I am teaching you a way to regulate your body. And some other tools for that are bringing in exercise as a common part of our day to take that trauma out and do that in fun ways, like pretending to be animals, to offer connection and hugs. We know that when you get a really good hug when you want it, it releases the oxytocin, those cuddle hormones. And so you're setting them up for feeling safe and connected. And the last picture I put on here is a breathing exercise that we can do with young children to help them take 5 deep breaths, even before they can count to 5, because we're using our hand. And just like the hand model of the brain, we all have a hand as a breathing tool. So I'm going to ask you to do it with me, just so it will be part of your experience. So you start with your finger at your wrist near your thumb. And as you move your finger up your thumb, you take a breath in. And then as your finger moves down, you take a breath out. And then with the second finger up, in and down, out. And you do that for each of the fingers, your third breath in and your third breath out. Fourth breath in, fourth breath out. And lastly, your pinky, fifth breath in, fifth breath out. With this exercise, you get your deep breaths, you get that touch on your own hand, and if you're doing it with a child, they get that moment of connection of we're taking deep breaths together. That's one of my favorite messages for children in hard moments. Even if they are not ready to take a deep breath, I will use that connected language of we, and I will say, we are having a hard time. I'm going to take some deep breaths for us. And then I can demonstrate these hand breaths. And as we take deep breaths in the proximity to a child, they will often pattern their breathing with us, even if they're not making the choice to take deep breaths in that moment. You can still give them the gift of breathing and calming. And it says, our feelings are part of us and feelings come and go. And I'm here with you in your moment of distress. We can calm down together and get the benefit of a little calming ourselves. All of our actions and words and affect need to work together to give that message of I am here to keep you safe. So we're watching our tone of voice. We can make purposeful choices to smile a little when we're talking or to slow down the pace of our words to communicate safety and calm and to better help them understand what we're saying. When we're touching, we can purposefully use gentle touch when we're reaching down. If we're feeling anxious, it might be easy to grab a hand, but we can slow ourselves down, hold that hand gently. Ask before we touch. That's that key trauma-informed practice of giving choices. And then if the child says, no, I don't want you to touch me, then we can respect that. And we can have their back if other people are trying to give them a hug or touch them when they don't want it. To really demonstrate to them, I hear your voice. You have a choice. And we need our affect to be regulated and genuine. And along with this, I'm going to tell you a story because we are wired to recognize fake as people. And you know that from your own experience. You're watching, does that smile go all the way up to their eyes? Does everything match? What's confusing? And children are wired to recognize fake. They are also still trying to understand what are feelings? How do they manifest in people's bodies and their voice? Did I get this right? Can I trust my instincts? So, a story from my time as an early childhood mental health consultant. I had been working with a classroom, and there was a lead teacher who was a very strong teacher. She had a big class of preschoolers, and she had a lot of really clear routines and a lot of energetic kids in that class. And on this day, I thought I knew what I was walking into. I get to the class, the teacher is sick. The assistant teacher is watching the class. She is young. She is new to the job. And the kids are literally bouncing off the walls. The classroom had half walls. Some kids were leaping over the half walls. And a little side note about me, noise can dysregulate me. And it was so noisy. Um, so I'm walking in, I'm using my tools, I'm walking slower, putting on a half smile, I'm using a calm voice, I'm slowing the pace of my voice, I'm moving over to the teacher. But you know what? My heart was beating fast. I knew that I was coming in. I'm like, I'm the expert. I'm supposed to be a helper here. I don't know exactly what to do. As I'm moving over to the teacher, a little boy comes up to me and he says, Miss Sharon. I look down, I say hello. He says, Are you happy? And it was in that moment that I realized I wasn't faking it well enough, but he recognized my affect. And so I had a choice. I could be like, oh, yeah, I'm fine. But we're wired to recognize fake. So that would have been lying. And it would not have been helpful to him in learning about what feelings look like in other people and how they show up. And to be honest, fake is creepy and fake is scary. So if I had said, I'm fine, I would not be showing up as a trustworthy person. I had to have the courage to say, you know what? It is really loud in here. It is very busy in here. I need to move with the teacher so we can work together so everyone can feel safe and make a plan. What I wanted to communicate to him, what I deeply hope that I communicated to him is that all of our feelings are okay, that our feelings have messages for us, and that we can have big feelings without being overwhelmed by them. And that when we bring our whole brain, we can problem solve. Some of the ways that we show up and give the message, you are safe, is by being predictable, giving information, and getting consent. So I put 4 examples of that on the slide. One is from the We Play Center again, and it is our transition warning, our very fun transition warning. At the end of the 2-hour play session, we sing 2 songs, a beanbag song and a goodbye song. So 10 minutes before the end of the session, we're moving around the playroom with the beanbags, letting people know the beanbag song is coming. It's almost the end of our session, and the children see the beanbags and they can hold the beanbags. And even if they don't like it, they know that the end of the play session is coming. And knowing what's coming is helpful. And doing it the same way every play session is predictable. So even if you don't like what's coming, you're better prepared for handling that transition. The other really common transition that's tough for kids is drop off and pick up at childcare. So having a consistent routine and and being confident in that plan, the teacher and the parent, and having even a special little way to say goodbye can make that transition predictable. And even if it is very, very sad to say goodbye to your parents, you still it's predictable and you can understand it and you feel safer. The same, we talked a little bit about asking before you touch, and that is such an important way to be predictable. And one example of that is when children have runny noses, right? Because they often have runny noses. You can imagine how different it is if someone is behind you and reaches around with a Kleenex and just wipes your nose versus moving in close to you with the Kleenex and saying, I see your nose is dripping. We want you to be comfortable. May I wipe your nose, or do you want to wipe your own nose? And then they have that choice and that voice, and they know you're coming. Even with babies who can't yet say, I'll wipe my own nose. They don't have that motor control. We want to come in a respectful way with that Kleenex and make eye contact and say, I see your nose is running. I'm wiping your nose. So that touch is slow and purposeful, and they know what's coming. And that those using those words to describe what we're doing when we're doing it, it's called sports casting. And sports casting helps the world make sense to kids. We can say what just happened, what's happening now, what's happening next, and help make the world more predictable for them, which is really good for all children, is especially good for a child who has their safety brain activated and who is not really sure what's happening. Or maybe their mind has drifted away from the present, thinking about how to stay safe, thinking about something else that has happened. Then by using sportscasting, we're bringing them into the moment with us to make life predictable. And so that it's actually a moment of mindfulness as we're staying in the present. This is what's happening right now, step by step by step. And through all of that, we're teaching, I will help you manage big feelings, that all of your feelings are okay. In fact, feelings have a message for us, that feelings aren't good or bad, but if we're feeling scared, that's your brain saying, find safety. If we're feeling sad, it's our brain saying, find comfort. And if our brain, when we're angry, it's saying, the world is not going my way. I need help regulating so we can problem solve. We want to teach them how to identify feelings and get their needs met. Here's a great tool to do just that. Again, Dan Siegel, the same person who made the hand model of the brain, gave us this tool called Name It to Tame It. The exciting thing about naming the feeling that we're having is that it is by definition connecting to our cortex, because that's where language is. So you're already just by naming it, kind of giving little bits of activation to that whole brain, to that cortex. So the first, we can do name it to tame it for ourselves, and we can do name it to tame it out loud, sportscasting to help children. We first step is noticing what your body is telling you or what you see in the body of that little one. Then you give it a name. Maybe it's angry, afraid, sad. And when we're naming it, we're accepting it. And I put this chart up here because I love the way it shows that feelings aren't good or bad. They might be pleasant to experience or unpleasant. They might be low energy or high energy, but all of our feelings have a message for us. So when we honestly name what we're feeling, notice what that message is. What about this situation is upsetting? And then we can say that name, sadness, 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 and let ourselves feel it while bringing that whole brain together so we can feel our feelings without being overwhelmed by our feelings. We can experience the feeling without being controlled by the feeling. We can keep naming that feeling until we feel that sense of control and regulation. We don't want to be cut off from our feelings. If we don't know how to regulate them, then our body will say, this isn't safe, and it will start shutting us off from our feelings. And there's so much wisdom in our feelings. So, teaching ourselves and others how to feel those feelings with our whole brain is a powerful protective mechanism. And the last strategy that I want to bring to you is problem solving together. And we problem solve with parents when we invite them to share with us their understanding of their children instead of telling them about their children. That no one's going to be a better expert on their children than parents. And then we really listen to what they have to say. We can describe what we see. I noticed that, Susan is falling asleep a lot during playtime at school. Is this the same or different from at home? What are you seeing? What does that mean to you? I'm so glad that we can think together about how to help her, show up rested and ready to learn. And this model of discipline called Flip It really uses the same strategies of first connecting with their feelings, regulating to feel them without getting overwhelmed. We're still allowed to set limits as parents, but we can invite their participation in thinking, how do we problem solve it? So that could be, oh, it is so sad to say goodbye to mommy. You're really feeling that sadness. I wonder what would help you transition into playing with your friends. And they might have ideas. They might say, I need a hug, or I really want the yellow truck, or can I go to the library center? Or where's that picture of my mom? Or they might not have ideas, especially younger ones. We still invite them to think about it. But the prompts is for offering some suggestions. Would it help to have a hug? Should we look at that picture of your mom? I remember you liked that story that we read yesterday. Should we read that first and then play with friends? Um, so really, no matter what the age of the person is with us, really inviting them to collaborate with us, to think with us, to problem solve with us, and really respect that children know a lot about what they need. And they have some really brilliant ideas about creative ideas about how to solve problems that we might never have thought of. So they have a lot to teach us too. If we find ourselves getting stuck in a power struggle, which can be so often easy to do with toddlers or even adults, that's when we want to back away, fill our cup a little bit, breathe, and then start to problem solve together and think together. That connection is such a powerful tool. So as we're wrapping up this part of our talk together, I just wanted to review, right? I don't know about you, but for me, if I sit listening to 45 minutes of information, it's hard to hold on to it all. So here are the 5 things we talked about today. The first is your self-care is so important. Prioritize it and build in those habits. The second is our mindset. Assume that people are doing the best that they can in that moment. The third is always look for ways to communicate safety using our own mindful self regulation and helping others bring their whole brain online. And part B of that is be predictable, use routines, and use your sports casting to really make life predictable. Fourth, help ourselves and children and the adults around us experience big feelings without becoming overwhelmed. And the last is problem solving together. So, in summary, thank you for the courage to bring your whole self to interactions with families all the families around us, because it's such a protective mechanism that you are hope in action and you are exactly what families need when they're experiencing traumatic events in order to really change that trajectory um, and leave children ready for better outcomes. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing and come off video because I know we saved some time for questions, and I'm so curious to hear what some of those questions might be.
Thank you so much, Sharon, for that really great and insightful presentation. We are now going to start fielding some questions. So we already have a question in the chat box, so I'm going to go ahead and read it. Great to hear from another 0 to 3 professional. What are the most notable issues that come up with training staff to be more trauma informed, like leadership buy-in, lack of staff time? What, in your experience, does a trauma informed organization do to consistently prioritize self-care and other trauma informed practices?
Yes, well, I am a huge fan of reflective supervision and reflective consultation. So when we're talking about setting aside time to really for our own self-care, we want to do that within organizations, not just leave people alone to say like, okay, when you're not at work, make sure you take care of yourself so you can show up and take care of other people. We really want to build that um, time to think deeply about like what is it like to be here, in the trenches supporting people, and how are my own reactions informing how I show up, and what might it mean to know that we all do our best. We're going to assume positive intent with our staff as well. And for that to happen, we're going to say we're all doing the best we can in that moment, but we can always learn from those experiences. We want to give permission for staff to have their whole range of feelings too and learn from them. So if staff are having a moment where they are uneasy or very sad or feeling strong feelings, that we want to honor that their feelings are good messengers too. And there's so much to learn from that. Um, so those are my first 2, is to really provide space within the work, week for reflection, and then use that reflection to really honor the wisdom and staff experiences.
Thank you. That's a great answer. Does anyone have any other questions that we would like to ask? Sharon? I thought the presentation was very informative, and I liked how you went through all of the principles of trauma-informed care and gave very, like vivid examples of that. I think when people are trying to put these core values into practice, it can be kind of become muddled. So having like very clear examples from real life, I feel can very be helpful. So we have another question. How do you recommend programs measure whether trauma-informed practices are you actually improving trust and resilience in families?
Mhm. So I think one of the things we are watching is participation, right? Like the premise of the trauma-informed practices is that it will increase participation and investment. And sometimes we're going to really measure trust in small ways. When I said measure small successes, um, we really want to honor that because sometimes people are protected and disconnected for very good reasons. So if people are showing up week after week with their protections in place, we're going to assume positive intent and trust that life has taught them to be very cautious about who to trust, right? So we are really thinking deeply when we don't see signs of connection to think how can we really intentionally show up for that and know that it's our job to keep building that trust and assume that protectedness is coming from a good reason, and we often know very, very little about the whole extent of what people are holding. So we as a team, it might feel like, oh, they didn't like the play session, but I'm just going to say like there everything is to like here. But maybe it was too noisy or something, but to check back in and say like, how was it for you? After people's first session, we always send them a survey. Like, how was that session for you? We want to know. And if they're just like, you know what? I told you noise is overwhelming to me. If a family is saying that, then we want to brainstorm with them. Like, well, it's a little quieter at the beginning of the session. I wonder if that first half hour is a better fit for you, or this afternoon session is a little bit quieter. I wonder if that fits for you. I hope that answers that question. It was
Um,
about measurement too. So I guess
yeah.
we are looking at return. Like, are people coming back? And if they aren't, we're like, that's good information. How can we shift to get that back? We ask people for their feedback after as well. if there's not another question, I have my own question. I'm like, what question would I ask me? And one of my questions was like, well, can these ways of showing up in these daily interactions, they're great forms for protection, but what about therapy? And I would say I'm a big fan of referring for therapy, that there are especially referring to evidence-based practices for treating PTSD. We know that if a family has experienced trauma and it has sunk in their bodies in the form of post-traumatic stress disorder, that time will not just resolve that, and kindness cannot erase PTSD. So we want to really know the symptoms of PTSD and know that there are strong evidence-based protocols for treatment, and find them and refer to them when needed to kind of give people a path to resolving some of those ways where the past is always informing your brain, that you have to always be vigilant because that's such a wear and tear on your brain and on all of your organs. So, to know what's in our power to do and what's not in our power to do, and to connect people with the resources they need.
Thank you for that clarification. We actually just have another question about evidence-based practices now that you brought it up. So this question asks, what evidence-based practices do you recommend? Are there specific programs available in Louisiana?
Was the question specifically around evidence-based treatments for PTSD or for...
Um, it does not specify. It just
Okay.
as
Well,
evidence-based practices in general, it seems.
let me just put a plug in for Louisiana's, oh, why am I blanking? The evidence-based practices trainings. Oh my goodness. I'm so embarrassed. Evidence to Practice through LSU, the program for evidence to practice. And because they have a great set of resources that say, like, here are the evidence-based practices for different um, needs that show up. And then you can search for clinicians who are trained in those practices. So that would include parent-child psychotherapy. It would include the grief and trauma therapies, like the one developed by Michael Scaringa for the preschool intervention for grief and trauma, and it would include parent-child interaction therapy. So there are lots of great therapies, even for very young children. So kind of knowing what the family is facing and then looking up those therapies, and we are lucky to have the Center Evidence to Practice for looking those up. And um, I'd be happy to send a link to the future if someone wanted to contact me if they can't find it by Googling it. And they are also offering so many great free trainings to continue to increase the capacity of Louisiana to show up using evidence-based practices. So if you are a clinician asking that question and you're like, not only where can I find them to refer, but how can I get training? Louisiana has really invested in providing that training, making it accessible for us so that we can really build our capacity as a state to show up for families.
We had two people drop in the Q&A box the website. It is laevidence2practice.com if anyone is interested in checking out of their work. So thank you for dropping in that link. I think we have we have time for one more question. And this question asks, trauma-informed care / practices are often taught as a universal set of rules or procedures to follow. How do you account for individuals' differences in experiencing trauma? As a corollary to this, how can trauma-informed care be adapted to different cultures?
Yes. Well, one of the key SAMHSA values is valuing culture, and showing up in ways that are meaningful to individuals. I see the SAMHSA principles as more like guiding lights and values, and finding ways that really hold on to that sense of respect and empowering people and listening deeply and finding out what is the right fit for them. Because you are 100% right that we cannot have a cookie cutter approach to say, if you say these words at this time in this way, you will have a relationship with someone and you will be effective in treating them. It is so important to design things individually and to meet people where they are. So you are 100% right. And if someone tells you that if you do one, two, three, you will always be effective, you are so right to be suspicious of that as a guideline. Um, that's also the power of reflective supervision so that we can continue to weigh our own knowledge, our own way of showing up, and when it's hitting the mark and when it's missing, and to spend time to slow down and really learn from that so that we can make more informed practices. It's also a strong case for representation within organizations. One of the things I love about training grounds is how powerfully they have recruited and supported a very diverse staff, right? So we have men on staff so that when men walk into the room, when grandfathers and dads walk into the room, they think dads belong in early childhood. We have Spanish speaking staff so that we can invite Spanish speaking families into the center and they can receive, support and connection in their most comfortable language. I wish we could do that for all the languages of the world, but we aren't there yet. Maybe as we expand. We have older people and younger people. Um, we have Black people from New Orleans. We have Black people from other places. We just have worked really, really hard so that when people walk in, they have a sense of belonging. And that also means our staff has such a diversity of impressions so that when we're doing our reflection together as a team, we have a better chance of making informed hypotheses about what people might be experiencing from us and how we might better show up for them.
Thank you so much for your time, Sharon. We are at time. Thank you again for your amazing presentation. Training grounds information is in the chat if you guys ever want to reach out to them. And thank you, Lisa, for being our interpreter for today. And as always, make sure to do the post survey at the end so you can get your CEU credits. So thank you everyone for attending. You guys have a great day.
Yes.